everybody, and welcome to Knowledge as We See It, the show where we explore exactly what engagement means to us in the workplace. As always, for LinkedIn's, I am your host, Steve Berg, and today we get to hear from one of the more exciting guests that we've had ever on our LinkedIn Lives. For some of you may know him as the L&D Detective. I think of him as one of the greatest authorities on learning analytics. I'm so happy to welcome Kevin Yates to the show. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on Knowledge as We See It, and we're excited to hear knowledge as you see it.
That's one of the most awesomest, if there is such a word, awesomest introductions I've ever had. Thank you for that.
No, we're really excited to have you. So, before we jump into our main topic, I love getting to know our guests a bit better. I love our audience to get to know our best guests a bit better. Tell us a bit about your background. Where are you from? How did you get to where you are today?
Man, okay, I'm going to try to do that in about 90 seconds or less, right?
Should I clock it?
Don't clock it, just in case I don't hit the mark. So I've been in training and learning and talent development now for about, let's just say 25 plus years. And I actually started my career in training, learning, and talent development in a classroom in the Chicago Public High School system, teaching teenagers U.S. history. I discovered I have a passion for teaching, learning, and education, and I transferred that passion into corporate training. And so I started my journey in training, learning, and talent development as a facilitator, which led to a role in curriculum development, which led to a role in instructional design. And from there, I had roles in learning operations, learning administration, learning solutions, learning technology, leadership development. And most recently, and by recently, I mean within the past 8 or so years, I have been narrowly focused on impact analytics and impact measurement. And so the work that I'm doing and have done is narrowly focused on answering the question, to what extent did training and learning measurably impact human performance and ultimately business goals? So that's kind of like my career trajectory very quickly. I've worked in multiple industries, have worked with some pretty visible marquee brands, like Kantar Media and McDonald's, and most recently Meta, formerly Facebook. I also am founder of a nonprofit called Meals in the Meantime. We help people who need food with pop-up food pantries. So that is a priority for me, and that's very important. I also am continuing to do the work of helping practitioners in this space find credible, actionable, realistic ways in which we can measure the impact of training and learning. So again, that's kind of like 90 seconds. Real quick, I am right outside of Chicago in a little suburb called Matson, Illinois. I'm about 20 minutes south of Chicago. So I don't know if I did that in 90 seconds or not, but I should have tried.
Now, you know what? It felt like 90 seconds, and that's what's important.
Okay. All right.
So I'm going to throw this out, to our audience. I'm trying to bring you guys in a bit more, connect with me and Kevin. I saw, Jill, you've already put it in there. For our audience, throw in where you started and where you're at now. We'd love to, learn more about you. So Kevin, as we get further in, over the course of our careers, we all get some great advice, right? I've gotten some great advice from some of my mentors. I'm sure you've gotten some as well. What would you say was the most impactful piece of advice you've received?
Gosh, I think, I've received a lot of advice, right? Similar to you. And I think the most impactful advice that I have received for me to do with my career and my work is to find an area of focus, or find an area of niche. I don't know which one it is.
I think it's
an area niche. Okay. Find an area of specialty. Right. So, and that worked very well for me because, as I shared, I have worked across training, learning, and talent development in different roles. Right. And so the advice was, figure out what your sweet spot is, figure out where you are most passionate, most important, figure out where you're most engaged. And so what I did after doing that work is determine that my sweet spot, where I'm most interested, most engaged, is the area of measurement, the area of impact analytics and evaluation. So that advice that was given to me to say, find your sweet spot, focus on that, zero in on it, that has worked very well for me. And I would say the same to anyone else who's watching and listening.
Yeah, I mean, I got a similar piece of advice from, someone who I wish I could have been able to call a mentor, but it was right as I was, moving out of the country, who said to me, data is the future. Learn how to work with data and you'll learn how to do and understand everything else that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So we're going to have a little bit of fun, and then we're going to jump into the meat of this. But tell us something about yourself that not many people know.
Wow. So what a lot of people don't know is that I enjoy singing. And I'm actually thinking about taking some singing lessons because I enjoy singing as much as I do. So right now I am a shower singer. And I've been told that, the pipes sound pretty good, when someone has heard me sing. So I'm actually thinking about taking some singing lessons so that I can see how far I should or shouldn't go with this idea of singing.
hopefully you get that really honest teacher who
I
doesn't
hope
like,
it's
yeah,
honest,
you keep
man.
coming and I'll make you good.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something that not a whole lot of people know about me. So don't be surprised if the name goes from L&D Detective to the singing L&D Detective.
Or the L&D singer.
Ooh,
You can
you're
take
onto
that on
something.
the road.
The L&D singer. That sounds like a real bad bar lounge type singing act.
See, I was looking at it as like the Masked Singer, like one of those reality TV shows.
Yeah.
Only people from L&D can compete, but you got to sing your
Ooh.
courses.
Oh my goodness, man. You're taking this to a whole new level.
It'll air on NBC next fall.
The L&D singer. Okay.
Okay, let's jump into the meat of this thing. You call yourself the L&D detective. Let's talk about that. What does that mean? How do you go about using those data and analytics to really uncover what's important to L&D professionals?
Yeah, great way to start, right? So I am called the L&D detective in our industry. And I think the analogy here is that, when you think about somebody like Sherlock Holmes, right? He was solving uh, murder mysteries. As the L&D detective, I solve measurement mysteries. Sherlock Holmes looked for facts and clues and evidence. I look for facts, clues, evidence, and data that shows the extent to which training and learning is measurably influencing or impacting human behavior and then ultimately business goals. So the nature of my work is one where I am literally hunting for clues, looking for facts, searching for evidence, and using data as the real fact based evidence to say and to show here is a training and a learning solution or a training and learning experience. Here was the expectation for how training and learning would measurably impact human behavior and ultimately a business goal. And now here are the results that show the extent to which training and learning fulfilled its purpose. So, on a lot of levels, I like to say that my work is measuring training and learning's highest fulfillment of purpose. And for me, training and learning fulfills its highest purpose when there is measurable influence on how people are behaving, acting, performing, and then how behavior, actions, and performance are empowering people to help the organizations they serve win. So I'm looking for data that helps tell that story. So it's not based on what I think, it's not based on what I feel. It is based on data that validates the extent to which training and learning fulfill its highest purpose. Did that answer your question? And did it make
It,
sense?
it, it answered my question. It also brought up a whole bunch of questions. So let's make this tangible, right?
Yeah.
So let's throw out a case. All right, we're running a change management program. You know what? Let's take a case we discussed on the ATD webinar, right? We've got a bunch of unionized employees. We're rolling out a new contract. How do we measure that? How do we measure that people are aware of and are taking advantage of the new, let's say there's a new insurance plan that they can take advantage of? How are we measuring whether or not people are taking advantage of that? Because there may be data we don't have access to.
Yes. So the first question that I would ask is what does taking advantage look like? Right? Because taking advantage of, air quote, may show up in a number of different kinds of ways. It may be represented in a number of different kinds of ways, right? So for me, the first question, the first area of investigation, if you will, is to gain insight into what take advantage means, right? When we have a vision or an articulation or a description of what take advantage means, that then gives us the path on which we start to determine the extent to which anyone has taken advantage of what you just described, right? But for me, that's where it's going to start. And here's why that's important, right? Where I see us continue to struggle as a profession globally is not having clarity about intention and purpose before our training and learning solutions are designed and launched, right? Or consumed and utilized, or where there's participation. We have to be very clear about intention and purpose. It's like a broken record, man, because we continue to say, as an industry and as a profession, you have to start with the end in mind, which tells me we know we have to do that, but I don't see where we're always doing it, right? For some reason, we aren't doing it, right? So I said all that to say, I would want to know, what does taking advantage of, again, air quote, what does that mean? What does that look like when it shows up? How is it represented when it shows up? Because when I know that, I can then measure the extent to which people are taking advantage based on the way in which it was described. Does that answer your question, and did it make sense?
It does. And so if I'm gathering what you're saying, what we're looking to actually measure is meaningful change, right? Meaningful change might be behavioral. Meaningful change might translate into, if I'm doing a sales team training, increased revenue because of the adoption rate. But I agree with you, right? What's the end goal we're trying to get to? Not, I want my salespeople to sell better, right? But something concrete, right? Would you agree with that? We need, if we're looking for our salespeople to sell better, we're looking for a 10% uplift in revenue.
Well, that's a great example, because you kind of went there in a good way. I mean, what does sell better mean, right? If I'm selling better, what does that look like? How is that represented? How does that show up? Because if we describe sell better, we then can create training and learning solutions that are designed to whatever selling better looks like. And then post the training and learning experience, we can measure the extent to which purpose was fulfilled. I want to add something else in there as well. I agree that quite often our training and learning solutions are designed to create change. But here's another important piece that I think that we miss sometimes. In addition to creating training and learning that creates a change, training and learning solutions can also, and training and learning experiences can also do a great job at sustaining or maintaining. Sometimes we want to move the needle, right? Sometimes we need to keep that needle steady, right? Sometimes we need to keep the train on the tracks. So in addition to creating training and learning solutions that create change, we can also use training and learning as a solution to sustain performance or maintain performance.
So even let's take that to the next piece, right? Because there's a famous saying: if you're staying still, you're moving backwards, right? If you're not moving up the ladder, you're moving down the ladder. So even to the point of, right, that needle is moving this way, that way, this way, that way. When it's moving this way, it's likely because we're staying still. To even get to here, we even need to have programs that are running. And to get to here, we need to have really effective programs that are running, right? In order to do that, we need to understand what our goals are. So how often do you see that the lack of connection comes all the way at the start of the process, where the decision that we're even rolling out a program isn't fully thought out? We haven't really thought it through end to end. And B, because we haven't done that, even getting our subject matter experts involved or getting our SMEs involved is significantly harder, because they don't really understand what we're trying to do and why it benefits them.
If I were to restate, and I want you to correct me here, if I were to restate what I think I heard you say here, the essence of what you're asking is, what happens when we don't do the due diligence up front to determine if training and learning is the right solution? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. I mean, not even if it's the right solution, to even understand what we're trying to do.
Oh, got it.
Even
okay.
before we even get to L&D.
Yes, I got a story for that. Okay, you know how early on when we were developing apps, we used to say, I got an app for that. I got a story for that. So I worked with a business once, and the idea was that the sales teams needed sales training to help increase revenue, right? That was just the conversation. Sales teams need sales training to increase revenue. Well, there wasn't a lot of thought given to all that was at play that had the potential to thwart the effort to increase revenue or support the effort to increase revenue. So there was no talk about all the dynamics that exist around revenue. That should have been a conversation to be had prior to any conversations about training or any conversations with the training and learning team, right? So again, the scenario here is that the business wanted to increase revenue And the go-to fallback, if you want to call it that, idea was everybody needs to be trained, right? Well, guess what? We did the training because we were asked to. I was on the training team at the time. We did that training, and guess what did not happen? Revenue was not
Anything.
impacted at all. Revenue was not impacted at all. And that is because, in retrospect, after doing some discussion and some detective work, what I discovered was that people were changing roles during this time of training and learning. Revenue attribution during this time of training was being shifted. So, for example, if I was on team A and I sold team B's product, I wouldn't get the revenue recognition for it. Team B would get the revenue recognition for it. That's a huge blocker, which has nothing to do with training. That's about the way in which you are organized in terms of revenue recognition, and training had nothing to do with that. So that's an example of what happens when you don't have the right kind of conversation up front to identify what the real business goal is, where the real opportunities are, and then after having that conversation and a little bit of work, determining what the best ways are to achieve whatever the goal is, which may or may not include training and learning.
Well, I'm actually going to dive deeper into your story, if you don't mind. I'm going to download that app, and I'm going to dive deeper. I'm going to dive deeper into it.
Okay.
So before you even get into the sales training, and you guys, I'm going to get real close to the camera here and get real comfortable with Kevin. Before you even jumped into the training, how did you even so we're jumping in, we know revenue is an issue, right? We need revenue to be better than it is. That's our problem. Does L&D get to come in at the diagnosis phase? So for example, and should L&D come in the diagnosis phase? So we need revenue to be better than it is. Well, it's not. Why not? Right? How often are we just saying, well, I'm going to bring in Sandler training. We're going to go do impact training. We're going to bring in this person, that person. Well, we don't even know what our sales team is doing wrong yet. Or even they're doing everything we're asking them to be doing, but the sales process that we have isn't working. Should L&D be that early in the process so that you guys can develop your training programs properly?
So how do I get at the answer to this without confusing people? So here's what I think. Right? I believe that we are performance consultants first and L&D professionals second. That's my view. That's how I view the work that we do. I believe that we impact performance with our training and learning solutions. But if we operate with a performance first mindset, we're focused on performance first. Now, I want to connect to your question. At what point should L&D be brought in? So if we have a business goal, and right now we're using sales as the example, right? So if we have a sales goal or a revenue goal, right? I believe it's important to first identify all of the variables that have the potential to influence and impact sales, which may or may not be related to training, learning, and talent development. But I do believe that after you reach the point where you've identified all the variables that have potential to impact sales, using this example, that's the point at which not only training and learning, but other teams should be brought in to talk about the collective effort to impact sales. And I put stress, bold, underline, highlight the word collective effort because in my 25 plus years of training, learning, and talent development, I have never seen one instance, not one, where training and learning was able to help move the needle or sustain the needle on its own. It's always been because it was training, learning, talent development, and something else. So let me bring it back full circle. So I'm hoping I didn't confuse you. Because your question is, when should training, learning, and talent development be brought into the conversation? I believe there's potential for us to be brought into the conversation initially when we are working to identify all the variables, all the contributors, all the things that have potential to influence whatever the goal is, right? So that may be at the very front end of the conversation. It may be part two of that front end conversation, but it needs to be somewhere at the top of that conversation, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question?
No, it absolutely does. And it brings me to my next piece. So now, right, we've kind of got our variables. If we're going through this process, what impact does that have on the measurement side, right? Because once
So
you know your
yeah,
variables, you start to know how to measure, right?
yep. What it does is manage everyone's expectations. And this is so important because, again, my experience has shown that quite often, actually more often than not, the view is that training and learning is a silver bullet. The view is that training, learning, and talent development teams have magic wands and pixie dust, and that we can work our magic on people, that we can fix people, air quote, fix them, and then they then become these dynamic employees that can do almost everything because they've been trained, right? Well, that's not the case. Um, Again, I've not seen one instance where training and learning is something on its own. So it is important for us to identify all the variables, all the influencers, so that the roles are clear and so that the contribution is clear as well. So it may be training and learning plus compensation, plus rewards and recognition, plus manager coaching, plus tools, plus technology, plus consideration of what's happening in the marketplace, plus considering what market conditions are. So it's all of these things, including but not limited to training, learning, and talent development, that we have to consider when we are looking to enhance or improve or sustain employee performance. All these things have potential to trigger or activate employee performance, not just training and learning. So we have to identify all of the activators, all of the triggers, so that there is equity in ownership, accountability, and responsibility for making that change or for sustaining that level of performance that we want to keep going.
Okay, so now let's jump into Powtoon's area of expertise, right? We are the platform by which people build videos, hyper engaging, type of learning content that you would use. So let's talk a bit about employee disengagement in learning programs. When you're looking at the analytics side, how often are you able to use analytics to identify learner disengagement?
So I think that things like disengagement are most often going to come through in what we call, qualitative measurement, right? Qualitative measurement are in essence, surveys, or they may be focus groups, or, it might even be observational data. And the extent to which, for example, we glean from a post-program learning survey an employee's sentiment or opinion about a particular learning experience or learning solution, that survey has potential to give us a relatively credible, strong signal about what we can expect in terms of how engagement or disengagement will ultimately impact performance, right? So if your front end learner survey gives you signal that disengagement is low, it's pretty safe to bet that you're going to see low to no application of training and learning on the job because of the signal we got about disengagement from that survey, right? We get stronger signals about engagement from a survey. We're then able to draw some conclusions, but we can't stop there. We have to continue with the investigation, right, as the L&D detective. So we may get a signal about the level of engagement or the level of disengagement via a post-program survey, which ultimately helps us tell the whole story about impact. But again, that's just not where it stops. So yes, when we get signals about disengagement or engagement, that is part of the impact story, but it's not where the impact story ends.
Okay, so now let's take a look, right? So we talked about a whole bunch of things where we, identify at the beginning, kind of we skip to the end, right? Because I want to stick to the analytics and measurement side. Obviously, the middle is developing the content, rolling out your programs, right?
Yeah.
What's the measurement that's happening throughout the rollout? So we can optimize the program as it's happening, uncover what's not working, and quickly make fixes or changes or optimizations to our program.
Yeah. So I am primarily focused on creating the measurement plan at the front end so that the impact of training and learning is easier to measure at the back end, right? So just in terms of what we're measuring in between, my work has not rather been so much focused on what's happening in between as it is focused on at the front end, identifying what are the key performance indicators, what are the measures and metrics that we're going to use to get signal, right? how are we going to capture that data? Who do we need to work with in order to get that data? How are we going to visualize the data after we have it? What type of story are we looking to tell? What's the best way to tell this story based on who the stakeholders are, right? That's all the work that we're doing at the front end. And so then after that, the training or learning solution is in the design phase, right? It's in the development phase. And then it goes from that to the launch phase. And then it goes from the launch phase to the consumption and utilization phase, or the participation phase. And then after that, Kevin comes along and says, okay, here are the KPIs, here's the data and the metrics that we agreed that we would use, that gives us evidence and gives us signal for the impact of training and learning. Now let's see what the data says, and now let's see what the story is, right? So using that example, full transparency, my work is less about measuring what happens, in that in-between phase in terms of the design phase and the creation phase and the launch phase. My work is a little bit less focused on that, but more focused on the front end, identifying data, metrics, and KPIs that are going to give a signal for impact. And then on the back end, collecting that data and collecting the insights from those KPIs to show the extent to which training and learning fulfilled its purpose and did what it was supposed to do. Did that answer your question?
Okay. It did answer my question. Okay, so.
Well, kind of, right? Because you want to know what's going on in between, but
again, what I'll say out to the people who are here with us right now, while Kevin comes in at the beginning, helps you identify your KPIs, and at the end you kind of get that report. Well, here's the impact. Don't wait for the end. Don't wait for the end. If you see your learners are not paying attention, or they're nodding off, or they're on their phones, or whatever it is for the in-person piece, or if you're seeing that your quiz answers and the grades that you're getting, at least on round one, right before they go through let me go through that quiz again and just eliminate the answers I already gave so I can get done with this. If you're seeing that, adjust your content, because I promise you, someone like Kevin or Kevin himself is going to come along at the end and they're going to say, well, that didn't work. Don't wait for the guy at the end to come along and say it didn't work. Optimize your content. Bring whatever you need to when you're seeing things aren't going the way you want. Bring it back in, right? And I feel like, and I'm going to say this, from the marketing world, we do that all the time, right? We start a campaign, we launch a campaign, it runs for 6 months, and then we go, well, we should have known 2 months in that wasn't working. It's not, set and forget and then look. It's a continuous process. So Kevin,
I agree.
What are some of the key metrics that we can look at that's actually going to provide, not insights, right? I feel like, and this is a failure on our end as technology developers. We give you guys an analytics portion of your LMS. Pat me on the back right here. What are the actual insights that are going to provide you something meaningful that you're going to see into the impact of your learning program? Some of the key metrics that you're looking at.
Love the question. And here's what's interesting. The most powerful, relevant, credible metrics that tell impact stories do not come from the training, learning, or talent development team. What'd you say, Kevin? Yes, I said what I said. So, because, there's learning analytics, and then there's what I call impact analytics, right? Learning analytics is important. And I want to make sure that I'm clear about saying that, right? Because learning analytics is more often than not that important data that we get from our learning management systems, right? So it aggregates information for us. It gives us insights about consumption. It gives us insight about participation and utilization, even demographics, trends, habits, right? All of that. And that is important. So I don't want to dismiss that, right? But again, those are what I call learning analytics. And that's okay because they serve a purpose. And then there's impact analytics. And impact analytics, for me, is not the same as learning analytics, right? For me, impact analytics is business data. It is data that tells stories about how the business is performing based on whatever that business is, right? So, for example, if you work in a call center, an important data point may be time to answer a call, right? If you are working in a factory, an important metric or measure might be the error rate for the quality of products that are coming off of that assembly line. If you work in healthcare, An important metric may be the number of lives that you save, right? If you work in fast food, an important metric may be, oh, I don't know how fast people are served, when they're standing in line. My point here is that there is no one metric that shows impact across our industry. It depends on the business in which you work and the KPIs that that particular business is using to measure its own business performance. So for me, as I do impact analytics and impact work, I'm looking at learning analytics, consumption, participation, utilization, modality, all of that. It gives me a perspective, right? So it's important. What I am most curious about is impact analytics. And when I'm looking at impact analytics, I'm looking at business performance data, I'm looking at employee performance data, and I'm connecting the dots between training, learning, talent development, employee performance, and then ultimately business performance. Did that answer your
All right.
question about the metrics that we
It
should be
answered
looking
my
at?
question. It answered my question, and it brings me right to my next one.
All right.
Right. So I threw the
And we
audience.
didn't rehearse this, by the way. We didn't rehearse this.
No, there's been no rehearsal at all. I wish I could say we prepped for this more. This is all real and authentic, guys. We're kind of going with the flow here. We talked about, I threw a question out to the audience earlier about XAPI. I asked them how many have actually adopted XAPI into their, into their learning programs. Now, I'm going to hit with a two-parter because there might be people on viewing with us right now who don't know what XAPI is. So first, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about what XAPI is, and second, how do we filter through the impact and analytics insights, whether it's taken from XAPI, not, is that effective? Is it an effective mechanism? Let's talk about that also. But how do we get that down to the instructional designer?
Yeah.
So that they know what's driving real impact so they can build better learning programs.
So at the highest level, and I'm guessing that our audience is diverse in terms of its familiarity with technology and XAPI and all that. So I'm going to try to explain it at the highest level, right? So XAPI is a way in which it's a design language and a way in which you can design a training or a learning solution in a way that gives you insight into how people are engaging and interacting with that particular training and learning experience, i.e. solution. So when I say you get insight into how they are engaging, what I mean by that is XAPI allows you to say, where are people clicking, right? XAPI allows you to say, when people do this in a training or learning solution, electronic, right? Online, self-paced, when they do this, then they're also doing that. So the essence of what it does, based on how the course is designed, is give you data that shows how people are interacting and engaging with a course. Why is that important? Particularly if you think about courses that are e-learning based, where you create branching. And by branching, it means that, people can make decisions, and based on the decisions that they make, they go down a certain path. XAPI can give you insight into the paths that people are taking. So XAPI can say, hey, Kevin is going in this direction in this training course, and he really should be going in that direction. What percent of people are going in this direction versus that direction? So we get all that data when we design courses using XAPI language and technology, right? What was your follow-up question? Because I spent a whole lot of time.
So the question is, is that so let's take it to the next one, right? If we're looking at impact analytics, right? Is XAPI going to answer my question?
Got it. XAPI will answer your question to a certain extent, right? Because again, think about how I contextualize what impact means for me. When I am investigating impact, I am investigating the extent to which training and learning has measurably influenced human behavior, actions, and performance in a way that helps them achieve business goals, right? So if we use XAPI to design and create a course that replicates a real world situation or scenario, man, it's so cool, because in that simulated environment using XAPI and an e-based training and learning solution, we can make a prediction about the extent to which we can expect people to apply what they've learned based on how they were engaging or interacting with that training and learning solution that was created with XAPI. So it's kind of like a good playground for rehearsal, right? And so based on the data we get via XAPI that shows how people are acting, behaving, and performing via a simulated e-learning experience, we can make certain types of predictions about what happens when they hit the floor in the real world. So that's not actual impact, but it does give us insight into the extent to which we can expect impact. Now, what we might be able to say credibly is that based on how people are acting and behaving, performing in a simulated environment, in a training solution that was created with XAPI, we can say that this training and learning solution is measurably influencing their behavior, their actions, and performance as expressed in the training and learning solution. But we got to take it to the next step because the rubber hits the road when people are doing what we need them to do in the real world. Did that make sense?
No, it 100% does. So now the follow-up question that I had to that was, so now I'm an instructional designer, right? I've got my XAPI insights. I'm developing the course. I'm trying to do exactly what you said. How am I gaining insight as the instructional designer, the person who put the course together, into the impact that I'm actually having? So the predictive model said, this should work. Was it right? How do I know?
Well, you won't know for certain and for sure until people are back at the ranch, right? And back at the ranch, when I say back at the ranch, I mean actually doing the work. When they are executing day to day and performing on the job, real time, doing the work that requires their skills and their capabilities, right? Because the goal is creating training and learning solutions that support people in being the best that they can be. And I also believe that training and learning is really doing its job when we put people in position where they can execute using their skills and their performance in a way that helps them win and helps the organizations that they serve win. So I believe the data that we get from XAPI gives us a strong signal, again, about what we can expect. So if I'm an instructional designer, I'm going to be very curious to see what the XAPI data says about the choices that people are making in their training or learning solution, because that it will then give me a signal about the extent to which I can expect them to apply what they've learned on the job. So I believe that XAPI data is valuable and critically important to LXDs, right? Because it gives them some insight into the efficiency and effectiveness of the training and learning solutions that they're creating, because that ultimately gives us a stronger signal about what we can expect in terms of impact. And again, impact, as I describe it, is the extent to which training and learning measurably influences human performance, actions, behavior, and how that then triggers them to be able to achieve business goals. Long answer, but I hope it helped.
No, it does. So now I want to take that to the level before. Right now we're back at the instructional design phase. We're designing our courses. From what you've seen in the myriad number of analytics, and by the way, at some point I want to play the game of what's in Kevin's cup because he's hiding it
I'll
from
never
us.
tell. I'll never tell.
From what you've seen on the back end, what strategies, content types, gamification elements are working best to provide that impact?
Undeniably, the best types of training and learning solutions are the ones that are relevant and immersive, right? And so if I am, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a role. Okay, I hate to fall back on this, but let's say I'm a sales professional, right? And I am taking some training and some learning. So what's going to be most relevant to me is the extent to which this training represents my world, right? Represents what I do day to day and aligns to the performance expectations that the organization in which I'm working has for me in order to do the job that I have been asked to do. So, your question now, if I read between the lines, it's about engagement, right? So what will most engage me as an employee in training and learning? And I believe it's always going to be that which is relevant to me and the work that I do, that which allows me to practice and rehearse as part of my training and learning experience. A training or learning experience that also gives me feedback based on the decisions and the actions that I'm taking in the training or learning experience itself, because that then lets me know if I'm on the right path or the wrong path. So the most engaging kinds of training and learning experiences that are most likely to impact behavior and human performance are the ones that are relevant, the ones that are immersive, and the ones that give me an opportunity to practice and rehearse before I go off into the wild. That's just my own way of putting that, to actually do the work.
So let's jump. I actually really want to dive into that, right? So it's the ones that are most relevant to me. And I think there's also an element of, and let's take your role as a sales professional, right? We wanted to mimic kind of their everyday life. Their everyday life is PowerPoint. Let's just be honest, right? Especially if we're talking in a world of technology sales or even most sales nowadays, right? Even manufacturing sales, I'm getting up 99% of the time. I'm going to, throw out a stat that has no basis whatsoever, but it's happening over Zoom. Nowadays, it's not, the old days where I get to come in, I've got my captive
Right.
audience in a conference
Yeah.
room. No,
Yeah.
I don't have a captive audience anymore. I got a Zoom
Yeah.
call where they've got 16
Right.
other Chrome tabs
Thanks a
open
lot,
at
pandemic.
the same time. Yeah, right. So this is the new reality. I'm on Zoom. And now, as learning and development professionals, it's almost a little bit like a sale, right? I got to sell you the information that I have. And we're throwing PowerPoint out there. How often is that actually going to be relevant, even though it is mimicking a salesperson in real life? How often is that actually going to be relevant and engaging for a salesperson to participate in?
Do you mean the training, or you mean the
No,
actual sales presentation?
I mean the mechanism itself, right? The mechanism of throwing up a PowerPoint
Oh,
with a talking
yeah.
head.
Yeah. So again, just kind of using this realm of sales as the example, right? So what I would be thinking about is, in the environment of video-based selling, what are some of the skills and behaviors that are most effective? And what are some of the techniques that are most effective, right? So, maybe PowerPoint is not the best technique. Maybe there are other techniques that we can use. And then I'm going to go back to what I started with. What are the skills and behaviors that empower salespeople to be most effective over video, right? I don't know what all of those are at the top of my head, but I am certain and sure that someone has thought about that and has captured what some of those key characteristics and skills and actions are to sell via video. So again, just always taking it back to my work, what I would be interested in knowing is, what are the skills and behaviors that were identified as effective for video selling? What is the most effective technique outside of PowerPoint that is effective for selling, right? So when I know what those skills and behaviors are and what those techniques are, my recommendation is then going to be design a training and learning solution that is intentionally and purposefully aligned to whatever that bullet point list is of skills, behaviors, and techniques, right? And as a follow on to that, my question is, well, how are we going to measure what KPIs, what metrics and measures are either out there or that we have to create to determine the extent to which, if we create a training and learning solution that helps people be the best sellers that they can be on video, if we know that, we know what those skills and behaviors are, we know what it looks like when it shows up, what then is the data that's going to help us give insight into that, as opposed to I think, I believe, I hope, I feel. And then I'm going to follow through with that to say, okay, 30, 60, 90 days later, we're going to use that data that we've come up with that shows the effectiveness of that training and learning that helps people be effective via video sales. And then we're going to determine, using data, the extent to which training and learning did what it was supposed to do, i.e. its impact. Whew, that was a lot,
Uh,
but
it
did
was
it
a
make
lot, but
sense?
no, but it was good and it made sense. And from my end, when we're doing the training itself, what I find is the the PowerPoint, it doesn't bring my salespeople in, and it's almost a way of showing them, when you're talking to your sales prospects and you're just chucking slides up on a Zoom, that they're not being brought in either, right? It's almost like, if I can't capture your attention with a PowerPoint, why do you expect someone on the other end of a video call to be brought in any way, shape, or form? And what I find actually with our clients is, as they're integrating more and more video, especially at the
Yes.
earlier parts of their course development, what we're doing is we're contextualizing. We're showing them what happens, as opposed to throwing up a slide that says, when you throw up a slide, people get bored. And I've sat through that course. I've sat through
Yeah.
that course where a person throws up a slide, stands up at the front of a classroom, pre-pandemic, stands up at the
Yeah.
front of a classroom. When you throw up a slide, people get bored. I'm sitting there, well, where do you think we are right now?
Well, maybe he was trying to make a point.
That's exactly what he was trying to do, right? And then he threw up a video that showed
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
hey, but here's what people look like when, you might have a slide up there for context.
Yeah.
But as everyone in our audience today may have noticed, there's been no slides. This has not been a webinar format in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And this
And when
wasn't
I
even
look at our
scripted.
right, and I look at our comments, and we're much more engaged. Why? Because what you're seeing is an authentic experience. And when we're going back and forth, and we're calling out to the people in the comments, and I'm seeing the comments and the questions that they're asking, they're engaging with us, and that's what
Yeah.
we want from our learners, because that's going to show the impact that Kevin can measure. When they're engaged, when they see what's going, they truly understand, here's the context, here's why I should be adopting a behavior, changing the way I work, whatever it may be of that
Yeah.
desired outcome is,
Yeah.
here's why. So, Kevin, we have 7 minutes left. I have some questions I want to throw to you as a wrap up.
All right.
We are in the middle of a revolution right now from an artificial intelligence perspective. Most of that is on the generative side of things. But for anyone who's been keeping an eye on artificial intelligence, as I have, I work in tech, it's what I live and breathe, machine learning has come a very, very, very long way.
Hmm.
How do you think, machine learning and artificial intelligence technologies are going to help predict and improve A, engagement, B, learning outcomes, and C, impact outcomes?
Man, really good question. So I'll share with you, man, full transparency. I am late to the AI game. Better late than never, though, right? And so very
Absolutely.
recently, I have started diving in to AI, really diving into Chat GPT and trying to discover what that means for me and my work and what that means for the world of impact analytics. So I'm still learning how to use the right prompts. And I guess, as you said, you're an AI guy, so you know how important that is. And I just, maybe a few days ago, even a little bit this morning, I was putting in some prompts with Chat GPT. And one of the prompts I put in was just simply put, describe for me how I measure the impact of training and learning on human performance, right? And I was really impressed with what it came back with. And interestingly enough, a lot of what it came back with sounded like what I've been preaching for the past few years. And I'm like, hey, did they borrow my stuff? But anyway, uh, so
Not just your stuff, everyone's stuff.
yeah. And so, I continue to ask it questions like, okay, now that you've told me that, tell me what it means when I want to measure the impact of training and learning specifically on human performance and not just business performance, right? So I just started playing around with it, man, just seeing what direction um, AI, Chat GPT, would go in based on what I was asking. So I believe that there's a lot of opportunity there. I want to continue to discover that opportunity, but to answer your question, what do I think? So, based on what I'm seeing and based on what I know, based on what I've been reading, there is a huge opportunity in the area of impact analytics for artificial intelligence and machine learning. I believe that there is a basic process through which you measure impact. The variation just comes based on the industry and based on the metrics within that industry. But there is a core methodology for measuring impact that I believe when AI and machine learning gets smart enough, we can put in things like, I want to measure the impact of training and learning based on this program that I just created where the learning objectives are to do XYZ and the expected performance outcomes are one, two, three. What do I measure in order to show the extent to which this training program did what it was supposed to do? I mean, that's a long prompt for AI, but it gives you an example of what I envision as the specificity and the way in which we can be real narrow in what we describe and what we're asking artificial intelligence to do so that it can give us the exact impact analytic answers that we're looking for. So I'm excited as I continue to dive in to see where I can influence, what's happening with AI, what's happening with machine learning as it relates to impact analytics, because there aren't a lot of people in the world that do what I do, right? And so from that aspect, I believe that me and the others who are focused on measurement impact analytics can have a strong voice and a strong influence in machine learning and artificial intelligence as it relates to measurement and impact analytics. So I'm excited about it, man.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. Listen, I've been on the marketing end. We've gotten to watch what machine learning can do for our analytics purposes in terms of watching how people go through their journey on a marketing
Yeah.
end, and we can look at where they jump in and out, and really see I like it, but I don't want to buy it yet, and then come back a week later. We get to see all of that, and I think the opportunity is there the same in the same way for impact analytics. I
I
adopted
agree.
it. Right, it's not a bell curve, right? It's kind of those waves like you talked about earlier. I
Yes.
adopted it. It didn't give me the outcome I wanted, but my boss told me I needed to bring it back. Okay, but now I just fell back out of habit. But now I'm back in habit, and I
Yeah.
really like it, right? And you get to kind of
Yeah.
actually see what that adoption curve looks like, because I think we've all seen, the forgetting curve long enough and it's been disproven and proven and reproven and then disproven again enough times for us to know it's about internalizing knowledge, internalizing behaviors, and internalizing, which all comes from contextual understanding.
Absolutely. I
So,
agree. I
so
agree.
Kevin, last question before we sign off, because I don't want to take up that much more of your time.
Yeah.
I'm an LXD, right? I'm an instructional designer. What advice are you going to give me as to how I can use my data, my analytics, the stuff I have access to right now? It might be XAPI, it might be the basic analytics I get in Cornerstone or Facebook Workplace, or or Bamboo HR, or whatever it is, to drive that meaningful change, so I can get to the point of even measuring impact analytics.
Great question. And so, if you are an LXD, if you are an instructional designer, or even if someone who's responsible for building curriculum, my recommendation is that you put on your performance first hat first, right? Your title is LXD, your title is instructional designer, maybe curriculum manager, curriculum developer. But I believe that the work of LXDs and instructional designers is so critical to employee performance, right? And so that's the connection. And I can say that from the perspective of my career starting, with facilitation and instructional design and learning experience design. I did that years ago, so I have the perspective, right? So my recommendation to a learning experience designer, an instructional designer, curriculum developers, program managers, and such, think of yourselves as performance consultants. Think of yourselves as performance consultants who are building with your design expertise, you're building solutions that help people be the best they can be using their skills and capabilities to impact their performance. So the data is important, yes. And you want to be able to use that data to show the extent to which your training and learning solutions are measurably influencing human performance and business goals. So again, think of yourself as a performance consultant first and be focused that way. And then take a look at the data that shows the extent to which your solutions are doing what they're intended to do. And that ultimately means that you may have to build relationships with people outside of the training, learning, and talent development team, because the data for employee performance and business performance is not owned by L&D. That's not where you're going to find it, which means that you'll have to maybe partner and work with people and teams that you haven't historically or traditionally worked with. So that would be my advice.
Yeah. And guys, for those who were on our webinar with ATD last week, Kevin, kind of hit on a lot of the things we talked about, and I want to kind of wrap the two of those events together. If we take what Kevin said at the beginning, which is start at the end, right? What am I actually looking to drive, and then bring it back? Figure out my variables, understand what I need to measure, understand what my goals are, then go into your course design, and then into your content. And when you're looking at your content, as much as it kills me to say it, don't do well, it's going to take me too much time. Because if you know what your end goal is, you understand how important the impact is that you're trying to drive. And you don't have to take up a ton of time on every little thing. Making a video doesn't take that much time. There are so many tools out there that you don't need to go to your design team. You don't need to go to your creative studio. You don't need to have someone who knows Adobe Premiere. There are so many tools out there. We're one of them. There are a few others out there. Get the tools in there that are going to give your people context. Get the content in there that gives them the context to understand why this is important, why they should adopt their behaviors. And then as you go down the line through your courses, you're going to get to that impact and be able to measure that impact that Kevin has spoken about throughout this entire episode. Right? Think about it as that full journey. Don't skip and don't say it's too much time, because I promise you, you're not going to get the result you want at the end. And then you're going to have someone like Kevin or Kevin himself going, hey, it didn't work. And that's the absolute last thing you want. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on our live today. It has been so amazing to hear about your wealth of experience solving these learning and development mysteries, how we measure impact, how we design for impact. It's been incredible. The conversation we had before we came on, it happens. I promise. I know. I don't give people an insight ever. That's never happened here. But you really helped me, and I think all of our audience understand how we can improve our workplace learning to actually provide the impact that will make our employees appreciate being enrolled in a learning and development program.
Thank you so much, man. That's awesome. I'm excited to be here, and most important, I hope that our time has helped our audience.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.